just leave it as Dr. Chitty. We've been looking, I looked on Friday at two of these colors. We were looking, I'm getting really confused. We were looking at cancer on Friday. Was it just cancer? Yes, it was. So we looked at the green portion of life colors, which is cancer. Today we're going to try and look at 3 in 1, really. So blood pressure, heart disease, and dementia, because each color represents a different pathway to health, I like to say. So I'd like to start with, how do you guard your heart? Guard your heart. I don't know if anybody, did you ever go to this installation? Do you know where it is? Tower of London. Anybody go there when this was up? So these are 880,000 ceramic poppies that were at the Tower of London. This was in the year 2014, and it was obviously to commemorate the start of the Great War, they called it, the First World War. And the 880,000 poppies represented the 880,000 brave men and women who lost their lives during the Great War. Now, I'm always reminded about the President of the United States at the time of the Great War, Woodrow Wilson, quite a clever man. Didn't really want to get involved in the war. He thought it was all about the Europeans, but he was convinced to come into the war for various reasons. After the war finished, he said, well, why don't we set up a League of Nations so that we never go to war again? The Europeans said, this sounded like a good idea. We don't want to go to war again. So the Europeans decided, yep, we'll have the League of Nations. When Woodrow Wilson went back to America, the Americans told him, we don't want anything to do with the League of Nations. Leave that to the Europeans. Let them fight it out themselves. Woodrow Wilson said, well, I'm quite bright. I could convince America to be part of the League of Nations. Sadly, Woodrow Wilson had a stroke, a severe stroke. He couldn't do really anything for the rest of his presidency. His wife really was the first female president of the United States. She did everything. Never gets the credit for it, though. So he was unable to convince America to join the League of Nations. The European League of Nations decided they wanted to punish Germany severely for starting the First World War. The Germans were really treated like second-class citizens until along came this gentleman who said, you know what, we're not second-class citizens. We're the Aryan race. We should rule. Now, I'm telling you this because I always think to myself, if Woodrow Wilson never had a stroke, if he was able to convince the Americans to be part of the League of Nations, who might have been a bit more generous to the Germans, would this man have had any kind of a stronghold in Germany? And I say that because each person's health doesn't just affect themselves. It affects their family. It affects their community. It affects their nation. It can even affect the world, in the case of Woodrow Wilson. Often people say to me, well, Dr. Chitty, I like what you say, but it's up to me what I do with my body. It's my health. And I say, well, maybe, but when you get sick, who is it who has to take you to hospital? Doesn't your family suffer? Doesn't your work suffer? Doesn't the people around you suffer? No person is an island, as John Donne once told us. And so when I look at this topic, guard your heart, it comes from the wonderful Proverb 4:23 from that wise sage Solomon. Guard your heart with all diligence, for out of it spring the issues of life. The heart is an amazing organ. From before we're born, it starts beating. And when it stops, we stop, right? Now, I remember being in medical school when we first saw the human heart when it was pulled out of a dead body. You don't realize just how vital it is to the entire body. Look, all these blue veins come into what we call the right atrium. The atrium then goes into the ventricle, the right ventricle. This blue blood, which is deoxygenated, goes up to the pulmonary arteries, goes and gets oxygenated by the lungs. When the oxygenated, this red blood comes back to the heart, goes into the right atrium. The right atrium then feeds into the left atrium into the left ventricle, and the left ventricle then pumps the blood out to the rest of the body through this massive artery called the aorta. And as those valves are opening and closing, that's what causes the noises, the lub-dub sound of the heart. So it works fantastically well. You may not realize this, but you have 60,000 miles worth of vessels in your body. 60,000 miles. The blood moves at a speed of 60 miles per hour. You didn't realize you're going so quickly, even when you're sitting down watching TV. But sometimes the heart does go wrong, and one of the biggest problems is when we get heart disease. Still the biggest killer in the Western world, certainly. Just about half of the people who die prematurely in this country die because of heart disease. It's massively important all over the world. The World Health Organization is scratching its head about what can we do about it. In this country, we lose about 20 billion pounds every year because of it. But what is heart disease? Heart disease is this. Look, these are your beautiful arteries, I'm sure. Beautiful, clean arteries. Blood just flows through so easily. Here, it gets blocked by these depositions. We call them plaques, but it's full of fat and cholesterol and sometimes calcium bits and pieces are there as well. And it means that this nice big lumen, we call it, as the hole, becomes very narrow. And so blood has to squeeze through this narrow place, and this causes all sorts of problems. And why does this happen? Often people say, well, I thought it was genetic. Is it in the genes? And I remember when I was training as a GP, when I used to shadow the boss of my GP practice, I would watch dozens of people come in, and they'd say, doctor, I've got high blood pressure. And the doctor would say, okay, well, it's probably genetic. Go on this drug for the rest of your life. You know, even then I was appalled. But it's not genetic. And if your doctor says it is genetic, just ask him, well, can you just tell me where the gene for heart disease is? Well, what is the name of that gene? Because if it's genetic, there must be a gene. It doesn't exist. And I also think if there's anything we've learned from the Garden of Eden, it's not to blame other people. Don't blame your parents for your heart disease. Remember in the Garden of Eden, God blamed Adam, Adam blamed Eve blamed the serpent, and the serpent didn't have a leg to stand on. Now, the first signs of heart disease. What are the first signs of heart disease? I would suggest to you that if you have a life like Homer Simpson, you already have the first signs of heart disease. Already. In the Vietnam War, what was the average age of the soldiers? Do you remember? The average age of the American soldiers in the Vietnam War? 19, that's right. So at 19 years old, when those young men were killed in Vietnam, when thousands of the body bags came back to America, they did autopsies on their bodies, and they found that at 19, they had severe heart disease. Many of their arteries were almost completely occluded. How can this be? Well, the first signs of heart disease, you already have it, even if you have no symptoms, because if you're inactive, poor diet, stressed, overweight, smoking and drinking, even if you have no chest pain, no symptoms whatsoever, we already know you have heart disease. We know that children, as young as 3 and 4, already have fatty streaks in their arteries because of their lifestyle. They're building up for the future. So this gentleman is somebody who I studied under, Esselstyn Caldwell. He did some research. And this was the one he did back in 1998. He just took 18 patients with severe heart disease, people who really need a bypass. When he looked at their 8 years before he took them in, they had 49 cardiac events between them. That means they must have had angina pain, heart attacks, strokes, 49 amongst those 18 patients. What did he do? All he did was change their diet to a plant-based, whole grain, no saturated fat, meat or dairy products. Within weeks, and I mean this, within weeks, the cholesterol level halved. No statins, just diet, cholesterol level halved. And this is the wonderful thing about his experiment. He followed them up for 11 years after. Now, for 11 years, everyone who stayed on this program had no cardiac events, not one, no angina pain. And the thing that he told me is that within 2 weeks, every one of his subjects could feel the benefit. So they could feel the difference. Now, in this country, it might take you 2 weeks to see a cardiologist, okay, just to get an appointment. If you start the lifestyle plan even before you see the cardiologist, by the time you see them, you might not need the treatment. I would suggest you probably don't. But here, this is the most interesting part at the bottom. 70% showed dramatic reversal of heart disease. And this is what it means. So this is an angiogram when we inject some dye into your arteries so that we can see the arteries of your heart. On the left-hand side, you can see this narrowing of the artery there. That's where the atheroma is. And here, this is the same person. Now, admittedly, this is months later, but you can see the arteries back to normal. When I was training up in Cambridge in surgery, I had to do 6 months of cardiothoracic surgery. That's heart bypasses. I guess this is one of the hardest jobs I've ever done in my life because it meant you had to do 3 bypasses a day. So you had to start at about 6:30 in the morning and you would probably finish about 9:30 at night every single day. And if I came before my colleagues and I said, well, look, this is what I did, this is the before and the after, they would have said to me, brilliant, Chitty, that's fantastic. But this is not an operation. This is just changing your diet, opening up arteries. Even today at medical schools, we're teaching people that you cannot reverse heart disease. If you have heart disease, you have to put a stent inside of it to open up your coronary arteries. And if that doesn't work, you have to have a major bypass. I don't know if you've ever seen a bypass operation. It's one of the most brutal operations. It can be essential, but it's brutal. You get a Black & Decker drill, open up the rib cage. Sometimes if you're tired, your hand slips a little bit. I'm joking. All right. Okay, right. But you get this drill. You open up the rib cage. You stop the heart. You hook the heart up to this massive machine. It's about half the size of a room, the machine, just to keep your body going when your heart stopped. After that, you wire the chest back together. You give them all sorts of pain relief, lots of rehabilitation. Now, given the choice, would you do that or just change your diet? I mean, just change your diet. I mean, imagine how much pain and effort that would save. There was one gentleman, I remember, this is at Papworth Hospital. This is one of our best cardiothoracic centers in the country. And I remember him. He was 77 years old. He had had a bypass operation 2 years before. His arteries now had furred up again. And the professor was sitting next to him, and the professor said, well, there's nothing more we can do. You know, we can't help you. We let that man go home to die within 3 months. Now, these are the best surgeons you'll find in the country. They had no answer to this gentleman. If they knew this, and if I knew this then, I would have been able to help him. There are people out there who are suffering needlessly, and all they need to know is how to reverse the disease. How can we get from this back to this? Well, there are reasons why. Other reasons why we get heart disease, by the way. And one of the big causes of heart disease is hypertension. Hypertension. It is so prevalent in this country. I think this is a low figure. Saying a third of adults in the UK suffer with high BP is probably a conservative figure. If you ever go to Nigeria, go to Lagos, I would say 100% of the people have hypertension. You can just tell it. In fact, every person I've done their blood pressure on in Lagos has high blood pressure. I've never come across a normal blood pressure person yet. And if you've ever been in the traffic in Lagos, you'll understand why. What does blood pressure really mean? Okay, so the big figure, the systolic pressure, that 120, that's the maximum it should be, by the way. That systolic figure is when the heart is pumping out the blood, and that's the maximum pressure in the arteries, whilst the heart is pumping out the blood. The 80, the diastolic pressure, is when the heart is now at rest. That's the pressure of the system when the heart is at rest. By the way, if you find that this figure starts to get quite high, that's usually an indication not so much of your cardiovascular health, it's more an indication of your stress levels. Because this is when your heart is at rest, so your pressure should be quite low, but it's still quite high. It means you're tense in some way. That's something to look at. Your ideal blood pressure, I always say, should be about 110/70. When I first went to medical school, I went to medical school in the 80s, folks. I know I don't look that old. I'll just say that before you. When I went to medical school, it still surprised me, and sometimes I think maybe I didn't hear this right. But my teachers in physiology were saying to us that to have normal blood pressure, it is 100 plus your age. I don't know if anybody remembers hearing that. Okay, yeah. So, yeah, it's not just my figment of my imagination. So if I live to 90 years old, my blood pressure should be 190. This is what lecturers were teaching us. This is nonsense. You go to places in the world, Central Africa, southern India, people get into their 100s, 90s, their blood pressure just stays like this all the way. This is where we should be. It should always be this high or low. Never should be rising. Why do we get high blood pressure? Why do we get it? Go to your GP. Go to your GP. Your GP will say, well, you've probably got essential hypertension. What does that mean? That means that the doctor doesn't know why you've got high blood pressure. That's what essential hypertension means. It means that we don't know the cause. And this is what doctors do a lot, by the way. If you ever go to your doctor, they don't understand something, they give it a long name, it makes them sound very intelligent, but they've not told you anything. You go to your doctor and you say, oh, I've got back pain. You sit you down, they say, oh, I think you've got lumbago, give you a prescription. You go home and say, yeah, the doctor said I've got lumbago. You look it up. Lumbago is the Latin for back pain. What does it mean? You know, but the doctor sounds intelligent when he does it, right? So I've got this new word, lumbago. So it says 95% of hypertension is essential, meaning that the doctors, the medical profession doesn't know why. But they will tell you this. They will say, you have risk factors for high blood pressure. Risk factors. We've all heard about this. You have a family history of hypertension. If you're Afro-Caribbean, if you're male, obese, diabetic, a smoker, high salt levels, stress levels, and no exercise. Those things put you at risk of having high blood pressure, right? Now, I say it's not a big leap to say that the risk factors are actually the causes. So we don't have to say it's a miraculous thing that people get high blood pressure. If you have those risk factors, they are indeed the causes. Now, some of them don't seem very fair. Let's look at them. Family history of hypertension. So this is where people say, well, probably it's genetic. We know it's not genetic. The reason why it runs in families is because we have similar diets, similar appetites, similar ways of dealing with stress. So that it's probably likely that you will inherit, not genetically, but just socially, high blood pressure. Afro-Caribbean in origin. Why should Afro-Caribbeans have higher blood pressure? Why should that be? Is hypertension racist? Why should Afro-Caribbeans have higher blood pressure? Type of food. So Afro-Caribbeans eat different food?
High salt.
High salt? Oh, we're getting close. We're getting close. Look, the reason why Afro-Caribbeans have higher blood pressure is because we originate from Africa and the Caribbean. These are hot countries. Now, hot countries, what you don't want to do is dehydrate with sweat, right? So what you do, you hold on to water a little bit more. How do you do that? You hold on to salt. If you hold on to salt, you hold on to water. So slightly more salt retention, salt sensitivity, means that we don't sweat quite as much. Now, when you come to a country that has loads of salt in the diet, Britain, Europe, America have massively high amounts of salt in the diet, you are much more sensitive. So that means your blood pressure is more likely to go higher. How do you overcome it? You just have less salt in your diet. Just be careful about the amount of salt you have in your diet. Males, well, obviously males have high blood pressure because they live with females. That's quite obvious. Okay, maybe a bit more explanation. Females, obviously, before the menopause, you have this wonderful hormone, estrogen. Estrogen protects your cardiovascular system. It's not all negative. It protects your cardiovascular system until you reach the menopause. Right. I always look at hypertension like a warning rather than the actual disease. Hypertension is serious, but I think of it more like a warning. And it always reminds me is when I bought my first car, Peugeot 205 GTI, 1.9. It was a beaten-up old car, but it was all the money I had in the world, I put into buying that car. I had now no money to look after the car. I just had the car. So when warning lights started to go off, okay, I can see the warning lights. I can't do anything about it. I can't afford it. Until one day I was driving through Oxford Street on a boiling hot day, and my car decided just to stop and steam up there. And everybody was looking around, and it was a spectacle. And eventually I had to get some person to trail my car. It was very expensive. And I think of hypertension very much like this. It's a warning, because if you don't deal with hypertension, you're not dealing with all sorts of issues that you're building up. So when you go to your doctor and they give you a lovely pill to reduce your blood pressure, if they haven't gotten to the root cause of the hypertension, you're still building up all of these issues. For example, cancer. So if you are stressed and your blood pressure is going up, you're releasing all of these hormones like cortisol. This raises your blood pressure. Now, cortisol doesn't just raise your blood pressure, it wipes out your immune system. When you're stressed, your immune system is very low. If you have one of those arguments, that really make you shake, pretty much your entire immune system for 24 hours is not effective. Your white blood cells get suppressed. If that happens, that means that those white blood cells, those natural killer cells that are designed to destroy cancer, they're wiped out. Now imagine if you're stressed like that every single day for years. That means all the cancers, and we did say we all have cancer somewhere in our body, those cancers are enabled to grow because your blood cells, your white blood cells are not fighting them. So you're at risk, increased risk of cancer. Anxiety and depression, obviously, if your stress levels are there, but you're not dealing with it, anxiety and depression can result. I'll go on to IBS and IBD, irritable bowel syndrome. You've heard of irritable bowel syndrome? That is actually not a disease of your bowels, it's a disease of what's going up in your head. It is a disease of stress. So if you look at somebody with irritable bowels, you take a little telescope and look up their back passage and you can see their colons and their intestines. They're all fine, they're all normal for now. But what happens is that your mind, because you're so stressed, it goes into bloating and constipation and all sorts of things. It can lead to inflammatory bowel disease, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, which have other factors that cause it too, but that's more serious and that's more permanent. Okay, now I wanted to talk a little bit about Alzheimer's disease as well. I think Alzheimer's is probably the disease that more people fear from even than cancer. Losing your mind. The good news about Alzheimer's is that it is a lifestyle disease. I think often people think, it's just a random thing, it can affect you at any time. It's a lifestyle disease. And you will see in the last few years, you would have seen in the headlines, well, if you're overweight, you have a high risk of getting Alzheimer's. If you're diabetic, you have a high risk. And certainly, if you're hypertensive, you have a high risk of getting Alzheimer's. For decades, we have known there is a type of dementia called multi-infarct dementia. Multi-infarct. That means you're having these little infarcts in your brain, which is where your arteries are bursting every now and again because your pressure's too high. And the legacy is that you lose some of your brain function. Multi-infarct dementia. Well, actually tied to that is that the biggest cause that we know now for Alzheimer's disease, somewhere between 40 and 50% of cases of Alzheimer's disease come from a major period of stress in your life, prolonged stress in your life. So whether you're obese or thin, or it doesn't matter, if you go through prolonged periods of stress, the sort of stress, those kind of relationship problems, financial problems, but they're over years and they're unresolved. That tends to trigger people into getting Alzheimer's disease. On top of that, all the other illnesses, the hypertension, the obesity, and the diabetes, that leads to it too. What can you do about Alzheimer's disease? Okay, well, first of all, if you want to prevent it, you're going to have to deal with stress in your lifestyle. But what if you have early symptoms? of Alzheimer's. What can you actually do? Now, I think this is quite interesting. There's been some research done on two things, okay, in terms of treatments that you can take. One is turmeric. You may have heard about this already. The next one are blueberries. Okay, there is blueberries. There is studies being done as we speak about this. And it shows that these two vectors, which are very high in antioxidants, if you get it at the early stages of dementia, if you give them high levels of turmeric, blueberries at the early stages of dementia, you are able to actually reverse 90% of the symptoms. 90% of the symptoms. Turmeric, blueberries. I'll come to the questions after. Right, so now, what that means, what do we know about turmeric and blueberries? We know that they're just very high in antioxidants. They're very powerful. So if turmeric and blueberries, I haven't seen the research yet, and I'm sure they're going to broaden out the research, but if turmeric and blueberries are being targeted, it must mean then that any food that we have that is high in antioxidants, like fruits and vegetables, must be good for Alzheimer's. There is another study that was comparing Nigerians in Nigeria to Nigerians in America and the rates of Alzheimer's disease. And they found that the Nigerians in America had a 60% increase in Alzheimer's disease than those in Nigeria. Now, I've already said that Nigeria is a more stressful country than America. So diet still does play an important role. So if you look at it then, so if you're looking at your stress factors, if you're looking at your diet, you're putting them all together, it's a way to protect yourself from Alzheimer's disease. You may see that there is a genetic link with Alzheimer's. There is a gene called the ApoE4 gene. If you have two of them, you're supposed to have Alzheimer's, a high Alzheimer's risk. But the problem is that people who have those genes, who change their lifestyle, don't get Alzheimer's. And people who don't have those genes, but have very poor lifestyles, do get Alzheimer's. So it's not a clear-cut genetic problem. And even if it is genetic, as we said on Friday, there are things that are much more important than the genes, and that is the lifestyle. Great. Okay, let's just have a little look at what we can do to go back and lower some of the blood pressure issues. Right. When I'm treating people, between week 1 and 4, it's just a pure plant-based diet. Pure plant-based diet. There's research, and one of my colleagues did this research. I used to work with a gentleman called Dean Ornish. Dean Ornish is the man who, you remember Bill Clinton? Bill Clinton used to have loads of heart attacks. Even when he was in office, he had a few heart attacks because of his poor diet. Dean Ornish is the man who converted Bill Clinton to a vegan. And if you listen to Bill Clinton's testimonies about since he transformed to a vegan, he had no issues with his heart problems. So I used to work with this gentleman, and he did this research with Harvard University and University of California, San Francisco, and it basically showed that it doesn't matter age, sex, race, doesn't matter. When you go into a plant-based diet, fruit, vegetables, whole grains, avoiding refined sugar, your blood pressure comes down. Always. Here's another thing you can do. This is one of the most simple things you can do to lower your blood pressure. Anybody like swimming? Yeah? Swimming? You got your own swimming pools here? Okay. You're laughing. Oh, you never know. I was looking for a free invitation. I always like to think about blood pressure when people swim, because can you try and imagine swimming in a swimming pool filled with honey? Filled with honey. You dive in slowly, I'm sure, and you try to swim a length in a swimming pool filled with honey. That will be very difficult. It will take up so much energy. That is a bit like what our blood is like when you don't have enough water in your bloodstream. So your blood becomes very thick. If it becomes thick like that, it will therefore require more energy to push the blood around the system because it's thicker. That's why your body says, okay, in order to get the blood round, we have to raise our blood pressure to do it. That's why our blood pressure goes up. It's for a reason. So all you then have to do is dilute your blood and make sure it's always dilute with lots of water. That lowers the viscosity of the blood. You can push the blood round a lot easier and your blood pressure comes down. It can come down between 5 and 10 points just by doing that. How much water is enough? I think as was said on Friday, well, you can't just say 1 litre, 2 litres. It's dependent on your size and how much you let out, how much water you give. I sweat a lot when I'm exercising. So for me, I probably take 4 litres a day. 4 litres a day because I sweat so much and I'm reasonably big. But the only way you can really know is by looking at the colour of your urine, right? If your urine is nice and clear like water, you're getting enough. If your urine looks like Lucozade, you need a bit more water. If it fizzes like Lucozade, you need to see a doctor. Okay, right. What else can we do to lower blood pressure? Here's something quite interesting. Greens are very, very important. The darker the greens, the better for you. They do something quite miraculous. Greens, when you've digested them, when some of those little components of chlorophyll are going through your bloodstream, they touch the interior of your arteries and they cause it to release something called nitric oxide. Nitric oxide. Nitric oxide, by the way, is the active ingredient of Viagra. Oh, now you're taking notes. Okay, great. And it's only the women taking notes as well, I don't know. The men are just looking like, well, what is this drug, Viagra? I've never heard of it. I've never had the need of it. Fine. But so what this does, it opens up arteries. As it opens up arteries, makes the arteries bigger, your blood pressure naturally goes down. Dark greens actually prevent us from having raised blood pressure. And just going back to the Viagra point, I always like to say, like Popeye, if you want to be strong to the finish, eat your spinach. Some of you understand what I mean. Anyway, those of you who don't, speak to your wives. Right, after that, you can't talk about blood pressure without talking about exercise. Okay, exercise is very important. Now, people often say to me, well, Dr. Chidi, you don't realize how busy I am. I don't have time to go on for an hour's walk every single day. I don't have the time to do that. Well, I say to them, sometimes we just have to prioritize things. There are things that we have to do. There's a wonderful book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. If you've ever read that book, it's an interesting book. The bit I like most about it is when it says doing the things that are important rather than the things that are urgent. We should be doing the important things every single day. The important things tend to get pushed aside during the day for the urgent. You've got to answer the phone, got to read this, got to do this, but the important things can wait. Time with my family, time looking after my health, time talking to God. All those things can wait because they're not urgent. But if you put them off and put them off, they soon become urgent. Because if you don't look after your health, you're going to get an urgent message from your doctor. If you don't spend time with your spouse, well, things can become pretty urgent within your relationship. So always make the time. And look, it doesn't have to be that difficult. You say, well, 60 minutes of a brisk walk every day. Well, suppose if you have a family, you take that 60 minutes with the family. So that's quality family time whilst exercising. Suppose you want to do that and spend a bit of time praying together at the same time. So you're praying, exercising, and having quality family time. In the few weeks that we've had, you can be getting vitamin D at the same time. 4 things in one. So it's just being sensible about it. Or fitting it into your lifestyle, not driving everywhere. Just programming yourself to leave the car at home. I'm just going to walk to the supermarket today. Those things tend to work. It's just simple things like that that make the difference to lowering your blood pressure. So we talked about exercise. We talked a bit about diet and water. Great. But there's something else that we need to think about when we're concluding this. You see, when King Solomon wrote this, the Bible is an inspired book. He said, guard your heart with all diligence, for out of it spring the issues of life. This is an interesting text because you may not realize that until 1624, we never realized what blood did. We didn't know what it did medically. So people have been dying on battlefields, blood spurting out, but we didn't know what this red stuff actually did. Here in this proverb, King Solomon tells us what it does. It says, look, out of the heart spring the issue, the issue of blood, the issue of life. This issue gives life to the tissues. That's what it tells us. That's remarkable. But look, it says something even deeper than that. And what it says is that the issues of life don't come from outside, they actually come from our own heart. The issues that we have in our lives don't come from my boss, from my neighbor, from my spouse or family. My issues actually derive from my own heart. Right, now let me just see if I can explain this a little bit further. I'll take you back. Marriage can be challenging, right? Okay, no takers here. Everybody's got a perfect marriage here. Okay, that's fine. Okay, I'll say marriage can be a little bit challenging, especially in the first year. I remember when I first got married, it was an adjustment. It's an adjustment. Maybe not at Newbold, everything's perfect. But for most of us, outside of Newbold, there's an adjustment. And I remember in the first year of marriage, there was one thing that my wife used to annoy me with. And it was that every time she left a room, she'd leave the lights on. And I would say to her, please, would you mind, every time you leave a room, just turn the light off. I would demonstrate how to turn the light off. It was my first year. I was learning. But no matter what I did or said, the lights would be left on. It would really frustrate me. There was one time I was doing this shift at the local hospital. You started at 6 p.m. and finished at 2 p.m. in the morning, 2 a.m. in the morning. So I'm walking back down the hill after my shift. Everywhere's pitch black. Until I get to my flat. And this strong beam of light comes out like a lighthouse. And as I looked at it, I could just feel my heart, my stress levels rising. I'm thinking, what is going on? Why doesn't she ever listen? I've been saying this for years. But then I got this kind of revelation just before I got to the front door. It was, why are you so stressed about the lights being on? What's the big deal? How much does it actually cost? Why are you worrying about it? I said, okay, look, I'm going to stop talking about it. I'm going to give up. I need some peace in my own life. I'm just going to stop. So I said, so I did that. Within 48 hours, the light started to go off. And I'm saying, what's going on? I spend years educating my wife, lecturing. Nothing happens. Now I've backed off. Everything works out. And I realized that, it was much of my lecturing that was making her stressed, that was making her just to naturally forget. When I gave up lecturing, she was able to relax. She turned the lights off. You see, the problem wasn't really with my wife, it was with me. What I thought was my big issue was making the issue. Just like the Bible says. Guard your heart with all diligence, for out of it spring the issues of life. The issues in our life come from our own heart. Your boss cannot make you stressed. Honestly, they can't make you stressed. They can only make you stressed if you allow it to happen. Stress is not about the environment that we find ourselves in. It's our responsibility, our ability to respond to stress. That's the thing that kills us. That's the thing that makes our lives so shortened. And when we are able to overcome this stress, when we're able to overcome the issues in the bottom of our own heart, we can live better lives. We can live lives that are free, easy, kind, generous, just like this.
จะได้อะไรถ้าเขาทำแบบนี้ทุกวันเขาจะไม่ได้อะไรเลยไม่ได้รวยขึ้นไม่ได้ออกทีวีไม่มีใครรู้จักไม่ได้มีชื่อเสียงที่มากขึ้นเพราะสิ่งที่เขาได้คือได้แค่ความรู้สึกได้เห็นความสุขได้เข้าใจได้ความรักได้ในสิ่งที่เงินซื้อไม่ได้ได้โลกที่สวยงามกว่าเดิมในชีวิตคุณอะไรคือสิ่งที่คุณต้องการมากที่สุด
Yes. You know, you see, when you're watching something like that, it makes you feel a little bit, well, warm inside, I guess. It makes you feel good, doesn't it? Now, imagine if you're the one doing this. Imagine what that does for you. Being generous, being kind, even in the face of people who are not being kind to you. It does something within us. When we seek to get vengeance and we're angry and everything has to go our way, if it doesn't go our way, we get upset. It causes so much bitterness inside. That bitterness is real. It causes us to release these hormones that end up killing us too early. When we end up doing things like this, even in the face of people hating you, despising you, criticizing you, it still allows you to live in peace. I think that's what God wants us to do, doesn't he? And isn't that actually what Christ did for us as the perfect example? While we were sinners, he died for us. It's a perfect example of how we can actually protect our heart, guard our hearts. There is no point in us having the bitterness, the anger, the envy. We have to learn to let go. We have to learn to forgive. Okay. I have... Oh. Any questions? Any questions? If you want to... Oh, good. No questions?
Yes, I have a question.
Oh, you have a question.
How do you give a high dose of blueberries?
How do you give a high dose of blueberries?
Yeah.
Just eat a load of blueberries. So it's an interesting point because obviously when any pharmaceutical company hears that, oh my goodness, blueberries are good for you, what they first think about is, how can we take out the nutrients of blueberries, put them in a pill, and give them to people? Because that's the way we can make money. Just eat blueberries, man. Eat loads of blueberries. You can have blueberry smoothies if you want. That's fine. Yes.
I can help you with that one. There's a Norwegian company called MedPallet. Out of their own private need, they set up a company. And it's not the blueberries, especially the wild blueberries, because they have the antioxidants in the skin and the internal because they're blue inside. The cultivated ones are kind of green inside. So it's only the skin that holds the secret. So what this company did, they got all the residual skins from the manufacturers of blueberry juice, etc., combined it into a capsule.
Yes, I'm sure they do, and yeah.
So,
but this is the point that I'd like to make. There is a reason why God made blueberries the way he made them. There's a reason why he made grapes the way he made. You may have heard, oh, the skin of grapes can lower your blood pressure, and that's why people like to drink red wine. I mean, grapes alone will lower your blood pressure. You don't have to put it in alcohol. But God put those vegetables and fruits together the way he did for a bigger reason. So we will now say, okay, we've discovered that blueberries, and maybe it's really the skin of blueberries, can help with dementia. So we condense that, put it into a pill, and take it. But the rest of the blueberry, that might be doing something else that we don't even know yet. So that, again, I say, eat more blueberries. Right? Next question.
Do you know when people start having early symptoms of dementia?
Yes.
The doctors prescribe some memantine, rivastatin, and all that. Would you recommend substituting that for blueberries and turmeric?
Well, I can only, for this, I'll speak for myself. The evidence that I've looked at, I would take the blueberries and the turmeric.
So would you recommend, like if you're recommending to, you know, the GPs or heaven to, rather than prescribe those medications to give people?
So most of those medications are there to slow down the progression. Yeah, they're there to slow down the progression. But if this evidence is accurate, that you can reverse 90% of the symptoms, that's what I want. I don't just want to slow down, I want it gone. Now, there is a point, actually, because you may know that there are some physical things that happened in the brain of a dementia patient, especially in the late stages. At that stage, you can't reverse. There's no way you can reverse because you've destroyed the nerves already. So you would then need whatever medication you could take to slow down the progression.
At the later stage, the medication is useless anyway.
No, not true. Even at the later stage, because people at the later stage, you can still make more neurofibrils, you know, these neurofibrils, these tangles. So what you want to do is just to stop more of them from happening. Okay.
I just have a quick question. How about the frozen blueberries? Do they lose the substance? Because there are some things like broccoli, if you cook, it loses those substances. And so, but sometimes freezing can also destroy. So is the frozen blueberries giving the same effect?
I don't know the evidence for that. However, I do know about, you know, frozen fruit and vegetables in general. They tend to keep a lot of their nutrients. So it's not like cooking them. So freezing them tends to keep above 90% of their nutrients.
I just say this because, you know, blueberries, at least here, seems to be very, very expensive, and the frozen ones are cheaper. That's what I...
Yeah, well, I was about to say try them and see. That doesn't work, does it? No.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, with the turmeric, you use turmeric powder, you know, sometimes in our cookings.
Yes.
Is this still effective?
Yes, I think turmeric powder is effective. I mean, the fresher the turmeric, the better. But I still know that turmeric powder, which is used an awful lot in the South Asian community, which is great. And people say, well, why do they still have so many diseases that are problems of oxidation? But then when you look at the rest of their diet, full of sugar, full of fat, that's the reason. So turmeric, there's no point having loads of turmeric on your Big Mac, right?
I'm slowly, pardon me, I'm slowly losing my memory.
I can't hear you. I can't hear you.
I'm slowly losing my memory.
Okay.
My doctor said I haven't got dementia, but by the time I leave here, I will hardly remember what has been said. Is there anything to help slow it down or stop it?
Yeah. Okay. I would try what we were talking about then. So the blueberries and the turmeric. See how it goes. How long have you been losing your memory, you think?
2 years now.
About 2 years. Yeah, I would try it. I mean, the only scientific evidence I've got for any natural thing helping is that's the scientific research that I've seen. I would try it.
How about ginkgo biloba?
Yeah, I've no idea. I mean, I know what it is, but I haven't seen it being used for dementia. Yeah.
Oh, for memory boosting.
Yeah, I wouldn't know.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right.
Yes, still on blueberries. Are they high on carbs? Because I'm thinking about diabetes.
Okay.
You know, using such high level of blueberries.
Okay, so they are very good carbohydrates. Now, I know we haven't talked about it over the weekend. Well, I haven't. If you're worried about diabetes with blueberries, the first thing I would do is reverse your type 2 diabetes, because you can get rid of it. Get rid of your type 2 diabetes, and by the way, the diet you would use to get rid of your type 2 diabetes would also help with dementia too. I should say I do have a few of these DVDs available, which shows you how to prevent and reverse many of these things there. I brought them with me. So that's just my little advert.
What about the low reading of the blood pressure?
About?
The lower reading.
Yes.
If it is 50, 55 all the time, is that bad?
No, that's pretty good. I mean, I think mine's about that these days. Is that yours? That's very good. Oh, wait a minute. Are you the husband? Because you said that in a very sad way. It's as though you don't want her to live forever. Right. We'll keep an eye on this too. Yes.
There are some research which we can find in the internet about vitamin B17 deficiency, which they said was the caused by the cancer. I mean, cancer is not a disease, but a deficiency of vitamin B17. Can you say something about it? You find these things on the internet. The reason why people have cancer is because they have a deficiency in B17. So I just want to understand then, if I now smoke 100 cigarettes a day and I've got B17, am I not going to get cancer? No, cancer is a lifestyle problem. It's not a deficiency in one vitamin. It can't be. It's a multitude of things. It's all about our entire lifestyle. Sometimes we get fixated on, oh, if I have this herb or I have this vitamin, I'm going to be free. Apart from when I talk about vitamin D3, which I'm a big proponent of, I don't have any shares in vitamin D3, just in case you think I'm trying to line my own pocket. But really, no, I don't agree with that at all. Okay, yes.
Hello, Dr. Chide. Thank you so much for this vital presentation. Apart from vitamin D3, what other vitamins do you recommend for us to take daily?
Yeah, okay.
Because
Yeah, all right. I don't recommend any. I don't recommend any vitamins, and that pretty much, and this is the wonders of medicine now and modern science and the internet. You will look that the World Health Organization did a massive study on vitamins. Massive study. I think it's done two now. The first one I came across, it took over 20 years to do a study on multivitamins. It used 4 million people across Europe, and the basic conclusion was that just about all vitamins are a waste of time. 1/3 of vitamins actually do you harm, because they're not just vitamins, they're mixed with all sorts of things that interact with your body. So I know vitamins are quite expensive. Why would I take expensive vitamin tablets that may do me harm, and for most of it, I'm just going to flush down the toilet anyway? And that's what we do. You know, people who take high-dose vitamin C, well, 90% of it you flush down the toilet when you pass urine. So what's the point? So no, I don't recommend any vitamins apart from vitamin D3. Let the arrows fly.
So normally, for the high blood pressure, if you have high blood pressure, it's related to stress and different things. What about low blood pressure? Because my wife has roughly 100 over 40, 90 over 40,
Yeah.
and sometimes she becomes symptomatic with it, like headache or...
Yes.
So I don't know what you could do in order to increase a little bit the blood pressure.
Okay, well, if you make her a little bit more stressed at home, I guess her blood pressure... Are you just saying that you're being a very good husband, that her blood pressure is so low? Maybe. But no, normally, I never worry about low blood pressure. I just say, you know, thank God for it. But if you have symptoms, then you should be checked just to make sure you're not anemic. So if you're anemic, you're not making enough blood, your blood pressure will be artificially low. And sometimes when you stand up, you feel a bit dizzy or you get palpitations. You should actually be checked by your GP just to make sure everything else is all right. Otherwise, if her blood pressure is low, it might sound counterintuitive, but exercise does help because it actually makes your cardiovascular system more efficient. Okay, but I would first of all get checked to make sure there are no underlying factors, make sure she's not anemic or anything like that. Okay, great.
And how about the B12?
B12, what about B12?
In relation to the low blood pressure, get that checked as well? As well?
No, not for blood pressure, but since you've mentioned B12, this is the one that I usually get asked about because if you're a vegan, did I speak about this on Friday? No, all right, sorry, I'm getting confused, I was doing... Right, so I usually get, sorry? What do you say, dementia? How did I know it was coming from you? Right. So being a vegan, everybody knows you can't get vitamin B12 from plant-based material. Okay, so someone like me, I promote plant-based diets. Where do you get the B12 from? Aren't we going to be deficient? Okay, this is my answer. I always ask, well, if you had a nice juicy steak on your plate, it would be filled with vitamin B12. We can all agree on that. We can agree on that. B12, great. My question is, well, where did the B12 come from to get into the steak? But we said you can't get B12 from plants, so it can't come from grass. Where does B12 come from to get into the meat of the cow's flesh? It's not from grass. You can't get B12 from grass.
From their stomach?
From their stomach.
Or
Yes. No, from the stomach, from the bacteria. So they take in the grass, they have bacteria in their gut, the bacteria breaks down the grass, but a byproduct is vitamin B12. Now the question is, do we have enough bacteria inside of us to make vitamin B12? Well, the answer is yes, because we have 10 times the number of bacterial cells in our body than we do our own cells. So we have 50 trillion cells of our own. We have about 500 trillion bacterial cells, most of them in our gut. When you eat the right thing, they produce vitamin B12. When you eat the right thing, they produce B12. When you don't eat the right thing, they do not produce B12. It's like a population. If you eat certain things that are high in sugar, very high in protein, you will get a certain type of bacteria in your gut. I'm going to try not to be foul here, but when people eat certain types of meat products, you can tell from the gases that they emit. Can I put it that way? Honestly, and what you also find, I mean, I can tell it. I mean, if I happen to have an egg or something, you know, I can tell that there's a different aroma about me. Maybe you can tell too. But if you have a plant-based diet, you have a different type of bacteria that makes different types of gas, right? So the diet that you eat determines the population of bacteria in your gut. The ones that make B12 respond very well to a plant-based diet. So you don't need to take a supplement. There's a small group of people who have issues with their intestine, and they may need to take supplements of B12, but that's a small group of people. I'm seeing lots of people having injections of B12. They don't even know if they're B12 deficient. And they just, no, let's just have the B12. I mean, what is all this trend about? Great.
My question is coming back to the blueberries and turmeric. You didn't tell us what kind of quantity you have in mind.
Oh, right, okay, yes. I can't remember the quantity. You can look the study up, though. I can't remember the quantities they were using, but I remember it was reasonable. So it was like you could have 2 smoothies of blueberries a day, and that was sufficient. It was something like that. It wasn't like sacks of blueberries. It was a reasonable amount. They do, and they are expensive, I know. That's the problem. No, so like, I mean, if I have a smoothie, it's about, actually it's about a whole tub, isn't it? It's about a whole tub each time, so 2 tubs a day. But look it up, because I'm not 100% sure of the actual quantity, but it's about in that order. Yeah, it's a bit more than a handful. It's a bit more than a handful. So.
Good morning. I wanted to say, firstly, thank you very much for this presentation.
Thank you.
I feel well informed now, actually, after listening for a few minutes.
Thank you.
And my question was actually, I'm asking on behalf of a friend who is always complaining of headache and sometimes feeling tired. Is there any natural, among other things that I found actually very informative that you were mentioning, natural ways of probably reversing or trying to control it? My friend has always tried to use some actually stop, what is called a headache stop pain, because like he has migraine most of the time.
Okay, so you want to know how to deal with headaches and tiredness?
Yeah, particularly in natural ways of trying to control it.
Okay, it's difficult to answer because you need to really know why the person's getting headaches. Usually, headaches are a result of really stress. Even migraines, the really severe migraines that we give people medication for, we know that they are a function of stress. So rather than trying to find the right herb or remedy that may help, why don't we get to the root cause of why the person's getting the headaches? This is very interesting. I mean, I kind of brushed over it. A lot of the physical problems we have, they really do derive from something that's usually quite emotional. And I mean this, even blood pressure, weight gain, all of those things, they start off from a place where we're not satisfied emotionally. And I would go deeper and say even spiritually. So if you find out what is the issue that is causing me to be so stressed, and what I mean by that is not just, oh, my neighbor, cuts their lawn at 6 o'clock in the morning, that makes me angry. No, the question is, why do I get so angry when my neighbor does that? What is it about me that means I'm so sensitive to it? Why can't I just say, you know what, let them do it, it's only once every 4 weeks. Why do I get so angry? And what you tend to find is there are things in our past that are unresolved that makes us react that way. So rather than trying to go for a super answer, whether it's medication or herbs, get to the root cause of the problem. Great.
I just wanted to ask about the blueberries again. But I'm moving on.
I need to study up on blueberries.
No, I'm moving on to another berry now.
Okay.
And I'm wondering if that's equally efficient or has the same efficacy. And that is elderberries. And I know they're not palatable, but they are very high in antioxidants, and you could probably mix them with other stuff if you extracted, and they're abundant in the hedgerows. You can pick the elderberries, blackberries, and also blackberries.
Yes.
Would they have the same effect?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very good question. I can only answer from the research that is available. It makes sense what you're saying. I can't possibly see why it would not be the case. But nobody's done the research on blackberries yet or elderberries. So they always say, there's no evidence of it. But it makes absolute sense. Yeah. It's much better, I think, yeah. But I don't have the evidence to say so.
By any chance, do you know what is the antioxidant that is in the blueberry that helps to work on your memory?
Yeah, it's not actually, you can't name it. Okay, so for those of you who do a bit of physics here, or you remember your physics O-level, yes, I did O-levels, I'm that old. The antioxidant properties in fruits and vegetables are found in its color. Okay, that's actually what it means. So in a blueberry or a strawberry, the reason why it's red or blue is because, oh man, this is getting into physics now. You really want me to talk about this? So the reason why it is that color is because a certain electron goes from one energy level to another energy level. All right, okay. So when you then eat it, that energy level is able to take away, it's able to take away protons from certain elements in your body. That protects, that's called reduction, okay? So I think I've lost most of you, forget about it. But it's not something that you can name, it's actually the property of the color that's in the fruit and vegetable. That's what causes the property. All right. Thank you for helping me revise my physics.
Yeah.
Just wait for the microphone. Wait for the microphone. Yeah.
Yes. I've started eating yogurts recently, the vegetarian type, and I think I'm getting addicted to it because I'm liking it so much. So is there any goodness in yogurt? Because I believe it's made from bacteria. And would the bacteria help my bowels? Is there any relation to it producing vitamin B12?
Right. So which yogurts do you use? Which yogurts? What's the name of them?
Alpro.
Okay. Yeah, they are addictive. They are. I'm speaking of somebody who, the small ones, I don't want to tell you how many I could eat in one go. But anyway, I'm not going there. But I stopped the Alpro ones because looking at the ingredients of the Alpro ones, there's a problem with all of them apart from the strawberry Alpro yogurt. You see, I'm an expert in this. Okay. Apart from the strawberry Alpro yogurt, and you only get the strawberry one in the big pots, you look at the ingredients on the back, all of them, apart from the strawberry one, will say they have glucose fructose in it. Glucose fructose. That's a posh way of saying high fructose corn syrup. Okay, high fructose corn syrup is the really thing that drives obesity, fatty liver. So it's only the Alpro strawberry yogurt that doesn't have it in it. So that's the one I still have. If you want to have a better one, it's the Provamel yogurt, which is the organic form of Alpro. I wouldn't worry too much about the bacteria, okay? Because when they talk about this bifidus, whatever, I mean, do you know where they get that from? Where do they get the bacteria from? They get it from the colons of cows, and the distal colon. And what I mean the distal colon, near the rectum. That's where it comes from. You don't need to put in your own. You've got your own bacteria. You've got more than enough bacteria yourself. We don't need others. Now, okay, sometimes when you've been on antibiotics, it might be a good idea to repopulate, but you know what? You've still got loads of bacteria there anyway. So that's my lecture on yogurts for you. The strawberry one or Provamil?
You know, you've got the plain one, the plain Alpro, and you've got
what's the point of plain?
Well.
That's like salt and vinegar crisps. Oh, and that's like ready salted crisps, I mean, yeah. What's the point of that? You want some flavor? I'm sorry, yeah. I know some people like the plain one. If you like that, great. Go ahead.
My question is, some says eating raw food, raw vegetable is more efficient than cooking.
Yes.
And another one is, how can we boost our immune system?
Sorry?
How can we boost our immune?
How can you boost your immune system? Right. So we can all boost our immune system by being less stressed. That's the big deal. If you're going to invest in anything, learn how to be less stressed. And at the heart of that is really learning how to forgive. I mean this. This is really at the heart of everything. Learning how to forgive your neighbor, learning how to let go of issues very quickly. That will boost your immune system in a way that we really can't measure, but we know it works. Vitamin D3 always helps, high-dose vitamin D3. And definitely exercise. Exercise every day, no matter what. Always go out for a walk. Exercise every single day. Those are 3 easy ways to do it. Well, forgiveness is not easy, let's be honest. But this is the important thing. There's so much research done on this, by the way. We know that even if you have not yet forgiven somebody, but you are thinking about doing it, your blood pressure comes down. You haven't done it yet. You're just thinking about doing it. Your blood pressure starts to come down. So if there's one thing you want to study for a lifetime is learning how to forgive. Thankfully, right the way through the Bible and everything that Jesus talks about is learning to forgive. He wants us to forgive. It's not just about us letting that person go. It's about us saving our own lives as well.
What about fermented food like sauerkraut?
What about it?
Isn't that good? And kombucha.
Yeah, I mean, they have their place. You know, they have very good things about them, but often they also come with a lot of pickle. I'm a person who likes that kind of pickle, but yeah, if you make it yourself, I'm sure it's healthy. But you just have to make sure you're not taking too much of that pickling inside of you, because it is quite acidic.
My first question you haven't answered yet.
What's the first question?
Eating raw vegetables.
Oh, raw vegetables. Yes, I mean, the rawer the food, the better. The more raw food you have, and obviously I'm not talking about raw meat, you know, the more raw food, the better. Yeah, absolutely. Yes?
Can I take you back to vegan diet? Many times the B12, you say it's produced in the gut. But how come many vegans still struggle with the low B12, or we're told it's still low and we need supplements?
Yeah, so,
diet.
right, so a bit what I said was that it depends on the diet. I think everybody assumes if you're a vegan, you're a healthy person. No, I used to have a vegan restaurant, and as soon as we put the vegan chocolate cakes out, I mean, everybody just rushed in. You know? So the true vegans, you know, the vegans who do it because they don't want to endanger the lives of animals, they're not particularly interested in their health. They're interested in looking after animals, so they don't particularly eat that well. So there is this typical vegan image that we have of a pale person who doesn't look very healthy. And yeah, a lot of them don't eat very healthy. They'll have the vegan chocolate cake, they'll have some lettuce leaves, and they'll have a tomato. You're not eating the right food. Your gut, or what we call the microbiome, does not produce the right vitamins.
So there's no need to then take supplements if you are eating correctly. There's no need.
That's right. There's no need. No need.
How about flaxseed, linseed?
Flaxseed's good.
Helping with your
Linseed,
B12.
but that's flaxseed and linseed are very good antioxidants, and they're pretty good for everything really. But they're very good antioxidants and omega-3s.
I think there is also a role for individuality and circumstances that has happened. I had appendix that wasn't removed for 7 days, and it caused an intestinal necrosis and gastroenteritis acute and stomach inflammation and lung inflammation, joint inflammation, kidney inflammation, and hip inflammation.
Okay, it's inflammation, we get
yeah.
that. Yeah.
The thing is that after that, they pumped me full of antibiotics to get rid of it, all that stuff, once they found that there was a necrosis.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, my body immediately stopped handling nuts, beans, cheese, and I cannot eat many seeds either, or very low amounts. I can just do it, and otherwise I get chronic fatigue or headaches and nausea, dizziness, lack of sleep, and
just after the antibiotics.
Just after this thing that something happened in the intestine, that it changed permanently, and there is nothing to do about it. I was with Professor Song, who was one of the Nobel Prize nominee at one point, who was a very good doctor, and he came to this idea that try to eat one foodstuff for 3 days and see if that causes you harm, and then try another 3 days on another time, and that worked out, and I find out that it was in the end the vegetable protein that was
I've got your point. I've got your point now.
Thank God you're still here.
Yes. Now, I'm going to answer a few things in that because there's some interesting things you brought up. So your body is now, and this happens to lots of people, after a serious illness, especially when you've got bacteria disseminated where they shouldn't be, that's what's happened, your body can now start to react against all sorts of things. Now, much of it's a bit like a leaky gut on turbo boost, what's happened to you. So things have breached the system, And now your own body is reacting against things that you would never react against. Yeah, I like the professor's idea because it allows you to identify what is wrong or what you're sensitive to. Here's another interesting thing. Just like you would deal with any autoimmune problem, I would deal with you also. I would make sure that because you're reacting to so many different things, I would make sure that you get rid of the two biggest factors that produce this scenario, and that is gluten and milk protein. Yeah, gluten and milk. Okay, just let me finish what I'm saying. I'm not just talking about you, I'm talking about everybody. Gluten and milk protein, that's what really triggers most people. And then, as you say, you can then start to introduce different sorts of food so that you can know which ones you're sensitive to. But here's another bigger thing about appendix. And I'll tell you this, but I'm not telling you to go and follow this treatment, but I'm just telling you how I've treated people in the past. If you go to Japan, okay, in this country, if you have an appendix problem, what do? We remove it every single time. Every single time. Even if it's not that inflamed, we'll still remove it. If you go to Japan, 98% of people with appendicitis do not have their appendix removed. They put them on antibiotics before it bursts, okay? And most of them, well over 90%, they just settle down. So the appendix is a bit like your tonsils. If you give them antibiotics early enough, it all settles down. I just treated somebody in Nigeria 2 weeks ago. Had the same problem. Now, I'm not telling you, okay, don't go to your doctor when you have an appendix. No, you still have to go, but I'm saying there are other ways around it. You still have another question, do you?
Yes, I had it, I think 5 times before it was discovered, and it went to necrosis, so that the intestinal lining was tightened by.
All right, okay. Yeah, that's
so
different.
that the blood didn't circulate.
You can't treat that with antibiotics. Fair enough. Okay, next question.
Yes, I wanted to just say that the gluten is the only vegetable protein that I can handle.
Fine.
And I was put initially for trying diabetes, trying celiakia, but it seemed to be that it was the other vegetable proteins, which is quite...
Other proteins?
Yes.
All right.
And it was like a chronic fatigue type of symptoms and migraine and nausea disease.
All right, thanks.
Any more questions? Oh. Okay, I'll come here.
What time are we finishing, Bud? What time? Okay, thank you.
Can you give any advice on things like Crohn's disease?
Oh, yes. Crohn's disease. We've heard of Crohn's disease? Anybody who doesn't know what Crohn's disease is? Do I need to explain it a little bit? Okay. So Crohn's disease, actually, it comes under the autoimmune, the yellow part of the life colors, because it is where your antibodies are now attacking your bowels, basically, and usually from anywhere in the intestine. Now, I've got a colleague, actually. He's a doctor. He was diagnosed with Crohn's disease 7 years ago. He changed his diet. He removed certainly wheat, gluten, milk protein. He's on a strictly plant-based diet. His doctors have now signed him off. He hasn't had any attack for over 5 years. So I would treat Crohn's in the same way that I treat all autoimmune disease. So that would be eliminating wheat and dairy, eliminating refined sugar, very high dose vitamin D3, which is 20,000 units per day, and then also trying to deal with the stress issue. Those 5 things should lead to a recovery from Crohn's disease. The thing about autoimmune disease, they're quite difficult. And when you go to hospital, whether it's rheumatoid arthritis, thyroid, Crohn's, they're very difficult to treat. But we know, once we know the root cause of it, we know how to reverse it. Great. Thank you.
There's a lot of new product based on coconuts on the shelves now.
Yes.
And it's everywhere. And I
Yes.
wonder if you can just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'm not an expert on coconuts, but it's a broader thing you're talking about, and that is, we always get these new fads, right, in health, whether it's pomegranate, coconut, aloe vera, whatever. I mean, All of them are good because, they're natural, they're good for us. But what we then tend to do, we say, well, let's market it because we can make money out of it. Coconut is fantastic. Coconut has short chain fatty acids which are great for our brains. Perfect, wonderful. But as with anything, too much of it is not a good thing. So as part of a well-balanced plant-based diet, fantastic. But, having coconut water, coconut for breakfast, lunch and dinner, you end up becoming a coconut. I have been accused of that myself. Yes. Yes, I mean, and why not? You can have some of it. That's not a problem. But just don't do it all the time. Have a variety. Somebody texted me yesterday saying, it was from the last church I was at. They said they were advised that the best protein you can get is from meat. And why? Because the meat protein, if you have a steak, it contains all of the amino acids, right? Which is true. If you have a steak, it's got all of the amino acids in it. So it must be the best type of protein. That doesn't make any sense. I say that we are not designed to eat one thing, a piece of steak. We are designed to have a plate that is filled with many different things that all have different components, and when you put them together, they make the totality of the amino acids that we need. I think that is evidence that God wants us to have a variety of food, not to eat just one thing. Next question. Or are we finished? Are we finished? Okay, who gets the last? Okay, we'll take the last two, or we'll take the last two or three. Okay.
Thank you. Any advice for reversing osteoporosis?
Okay, osteoporosis. So osteoporosis is really like the wear and tear of our joints. Now, the reasons for osteoporosis are varied, and I always say that if you have a diet that is low in dairy products and meat and sugar, you won't have osteoporosis. However, we can still get it because it's wear and tear. Once you've got it, you can't really reverse it. But what you can do is get rid of a lot of the pains around osteoporosis. So, for example, I'm sorry, did you say osteoporosis or osteoarthritis? Right, okay, I'm giving you the complete wrong information. Sorry. You can reverse osteoporosis. You can remineralize your bones by getting off anything that has the large proteins like meat and milk. You can by exercising. The best way to strengthen bones is by intermittent pressure on your bone. Did you know that? If you put constant pressure on a bone, constant pressure, you will deform your bone. If you put no pressure on your bone, it becomes osteoporotic and weak. So when they go up to space and there's no gravity, their bones are always very weak when they come back. But if you constantly put intermittent pressure on your bones, it mineralizes. It makes more bone laid down. So exercise, a good plant-based, good healthy plant-based diet. Some people don't even believe this. If you who eats the most animal products on earth? Do you know? Which society of people? Who's that? No, humans. Sorry? Oh, Greenland, you're very close. Eskimo. Who said Eskimos? Very good. Yeah, Eskimos eat the most animal products in the humans. But they have the highest rates of osteoporosis. They have the highest rates of hip fractures at very early stages. There's a tribe in Africa called the Bantu tribe, B-A-N-T-U tribe. They're completely vegan. Rarely do they have any hip fractures, and they have great bone density. There was a study that compared the two. So that's the best way. So yeah, osteoporosis is certainly reversible. Osteoarthritis I was thinking about, which is not. Yes?
Just a quick one. Back to multivitamins.
Yes.
You did say that, taking multivitamins, like just flushing them down the toilet. But with children, GPs always advise Abidec because it's got all the vitamins.
Yeah.
And I've bought loads of them and threw away most of them anyway because, I don't know.
That's true.
I'm not very keen on giving them, but at the same time I'm thinking maybe I'm doing disservice.
No, look, your children, I mean, I've got a young child, and certainly she has vitamin D3, but she eats loads of fruit, she eats loads of vegetables. That's everything she needs, and she looks very healthy to me. She just won a race at her school, 2 years old. She beat some of the 4-year-olds. That's me boasting. No multivitamins. There you go. Who's the last one? Yes.
Obviously, tonsils are here to fight infection, but what if tonsils itself become infectious a few times a year?
Yes.
Is it good to remove them, or because...
Yeah, unless they're causing you a severe problem, you know, a life-altering problem, I try and hold on to my tonsils. You know, I think God put those tonsils there for a reason. In the old days, we used to just whip them out. I don't agree with that. I think, really, we're going through the same thing with the appendix at the moment. We just get rid of it, you know. It does have a function. It does protect us. So, no, I don't agree with whipping them out. Sometimes it can be quite dangerous. You know, they can be so swollen that you can't even swallow your own saliva, and that requires urgent treatment. But I would really hesitate before getting them removed. Well, thank you very much. I think we've finished this phase of the program. Anybody who is actually interested in getting a DVD before I leave, please come and see me. You have another question. You want a DVD? Yeah, so, and by the way, they are £20, I'm afraid. I can't give them to you for free. I would love to give them to you for free. But £20 that deals with all 9 diseases, that's not bad. Just over £2 a disease. I mean, anyway, no more selling. Thank you very much.
A round of applause for him, please. Wow, I think we've really been blessed today. Is that right? Yes? And because we've been sitting for so long, can we please stand? Excellent.
Great.
Dr. Chidi, on behalf of Newbold Church, as you can see them all standing, we'd like to say a very big thank you to you.
Thank you.
It's been awesome. I think some of the key things that we will take away definitely this weekend is forgiveness. Forgiveness. I'm off on my way to a family meeting, so we're going to go and discuss some issues. And it's also about spending quality time with your family and dealing with some root cause problems that are causing people stress. And I think it's a good vitamin, healthy, natural law that we should just abide by. If we know we've upset someone or we know we need to talk to somebody, please put that in your calendar or timetable and spend that quality time doing it. And the other thing, obviously, the more colors in your food, the better. I think that's a real good, healthy tip. Please be seated, by the way. Be seated. Thank you. We will wrap up. We only have an hour, so we've answered questions. We've obviously heard about hypertension, Alzheimer's, and other diseases. And I know the health song people are going to come and give us the health song. And finally, Davina, when she comes with the box, she has the DVDs available. Please see myself, Davina, or, of course, yourself, if you do want a DVD. 1 second.
Yes, I want to ask you, those who would like to buy the DVD, could you put your hands up? And if you see Dr. Chidi at the back. Have you got the DVDs? Got them there. Okay, fine.
Yeah. So when we've finished, we'll sort them out here. Is that all right? So, Dr. Chidi, you can sit down, relax a little. You're not running away, are you? Okay. Yes. Yeah, and we won't do it inside the church. Obviously, we've got to reverence and respect the church. You know, I'm a big fan of that. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so, all right, we'll sort them out with Davina outside the church, all right, when we're done. Lovely. Once again, we're going to hear the health song. If possible, Pastor Ron, are you able to put the words on the screen so that we can all sing along? This song was designed purposely for this program, and it was our theme song, so we'd love you to try and see if you can learn the words. Teach your children. It's a very good one to have. We're just waiting for the screen to come up. Is that going to be possible? Okay. The mic's not on? Thank you.
Father, thank you for your hand and for giving us good health. Thank you for your grace and light. It gives warmth and shines so bright. May we leave the temperance flow. Let us not its glory flow. Thank you, Father, for sweet rest. May we not be worn and stressed. May we exercise always and keep moving all our days. May your diet always be for all harmful substance free. Thank you for our water supply. We should not be parched and dry, and may we each passing hour put our trust in your great power. Father, help us all today, all these laws to obey. May we always faithful be, then at last to live with thee.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well done. That was excellent. We will wrap up with the very final New Start acronym. So the meaning of New Start, what is it about healthy living? What exactly can we do? This will be the third time this is being presented, so I'm sure it will make sense and we now can actually take away and start doing what we're advised to do. Just before I wrap up, I do understand that the cafeteria, which is where Davina works, on Newbold College campus will be closed to visitors next week. So please just be aware that they've got a reunion going on for some of the older members, for the alumni, and therefore they won't have capacity for any visitors to come to the cafeteria. Obviously it's open to the staff and the College of Newbold, but for outside visitors, just be aware. Thank you so much. I'm going to call on Davina. I know you've had a very long weekend, Davina, and you've shared a lot with us, and we had a fantastic time yesterday and also on Friday. We're going to leave you to just give us this last taster of New Start. Thank you.
Thank you once more, Florence. Today, I would like to do this a little bit different, because I think we've had most of the same persons have been here for the whole weekend, and we've seen it twice already. What I'd like for us to take an active participation in the New Start acronym today. So when you leave here, it will be even more embedded in your mind. So first thing that we're going to do is we're going to stand throughout the presentation, and we will be doing some activities as well. And that will help us, it will help to embed it in our minds. So we're going to stand, and we're going to go through the acronym. N is for? Yes, N is for good nutrition. E is for? How often should you exercise? I didn't get that. Yes, basically every day we should exercise. And W is for? Okay, how much water should you drink? All right, let me just run that by you again. for every 50 pounds you weigh, you should drink a liter of water. Okay, for every 25 kilos you weigh, you should drink a liter of water, if that is easier. Yes. And water is also good externally. Things like hydrotherapy, it's good for headache. You could put cold ice on your head, helps you to relieve headaches as well. So water is good internally as well as externally. Sunshine. How much sunshine do we need to get our fix of vitamin D3 per week? 5 to 15 minutes, 3 times per week, 3 days per week in direct sunlight. So not 4 or 5 hours sunbathing, because then you may get skin cancer as well. But 5 to 15 minutes, 3 days per week will give you your fix of vitamin D. Temperance, what is temperance? Moderation, yes. Any other answer? Abstinence, yes. Any other answer? A beautiful smile. Okay. It's total abstinence from what is bad and moderation in what is good. So don't go drinking 2 boxes of soy milk because it's good. Right? Moderation. 2 glasses for the day is good enough. Air. We have a few plants that can help us to purify our air. That's recommended by NASA. Could we just name them out, please? Peace lily, spider plant, English ivy, heartleaf philodendron, lictus, African violet, Chinese evergreen, chrysanthemum. If we could take a screenshot of this, that would be good. When you go to your shopping this weekend, try and pick up one of these plants. It helps to purify the air quality and also beautifies your home. And one of the best ways to get your fresh air is by exercising outdoors. And while I do love the gym, we've got to admit it doesn't always smell fresh. Our best exercise is outside. Regardless of the weather, we can do our walk outside. When it is snowy or rainy, just put on the right attire for the weather. And what's the other new START acronym after air? Rest? No, it's rest. Yes. It's rest. How much rest do we need per night? Right. So for adults, we need 7 to 8 hours. For, I think, kids, we need about 9 hours. And there, we can Google this information. Different age groups require different amount of rest. Children require the most, I think. But for us adults, 7 to 8 hours per night is enough. Not 4 hours, right? 4 hours of rest where you will drive. They say you drive equivalent to someone who's intoxicated with alcohol. So that's, and I do know a lot of us get 4 hours, but we need to change that and try to get our 7 to 8 hours of undisturbed rest. So our lovely tablets and mobile phone, set a bedtime for them as well. Turn them off, put them to charge in another room. Turn your lights off. Get peaceful, sweet sleep. And after rest, we have, before rest, I think we had trust. We had mistrust. Oh, no, we did temperance. Now we are at trust. Yes, now we are at trust. And we know that no matter how high a mountain is, no matter how wide it is, we can do all things through Christ who strengthens us. So these 8 natural laws of health, we can do them. We can live them. We can be a walking, living example of the 8 natural laws of health by putting our trust in the Lord to help us to do it, right? I had a picture that I brought with me to show you what I used to be like, but I forgot it in the car. But maybe another time. The next Health Expo will be September, the last weekend in September. I think maybe, yeah, it will be announced. You'll see the flyers going around, but it's the last weekend, the Friday, the Sabbath, and the Sunday. And it will be in Bracknell, but I'm hoping to get that area at Waitrose so we could do it out there. I think it would be really brilliant to get the community, to go out to the community, because we don't want to keep this lovely blessing to ourselves. We want to share it so others can experience good health, peace of mind, and just the joy of knowing Jesus Christ as well. So if anyone knows how to get Waitrose, you can link me. And I just want to thank everyone for coming out to this expo and for supporting it. And I will hand back over to Florence because she is better at this side. But I just want to reiterate New Start. Good nutrition. And we eliminate the white stuff. So the white flour, the white bread, the white pasta, just put those in the rubbish. Get your whole foods and your whole grains, right? So things like your sweet potato, that's very good. Things like your quinoa, that's very good as well. They're nutrient dense. And that's the type of food that we should be looking for. So when you go to the supermarket, think nutrient dense, not calorie dense. All the bleach stuff, the nutrients have been removed. And even when it says enriched, what it means is that they've removed all the good stuff and then they put like a little bit in it. No, just go for your brown rice or your wild rice or your red rice, your quinoa, your amaranth, there's just so many grains. When I decided that I wanted to start eating healthy, I saw a section in the supermarket, all these strange names. I just said, okay, you know what? I'm going to give these a try. Others have eaten them and lived. I will live as well. So I just put them in my basket. Some I still have in my cupboard. But I've got to say, I've tried a lot of stuff, and they're actually good, and they're actually quite easy, you know. And in terms of your body will thank you. Your stomach will say thank you. You will feel the difference. You will feel the difference. And exercise, remember, it's not just about your regular weekly exercise, your regular daily exercise. It's also about keeping active, because inactivity is the fourth leading cause of death in the world, and sitting kills. So leaving from here today, challenge yourself. 10,000 to 12,000 steps per day is possible. It may feel a little bit hard to start with, and you will be tired, especially if you're not used to it, but it is possible, and you can do it. You can trust the Lord, you can do it. So if you start your first day and you only did 4,000, just don't give up. Next day you will do 5, and you will get there. And try and sit no more than 3 hours per day. So try find things to do to keep you standing. On the telephone, you stand. Your computer, on your desk, you stand. Do what you can do. Think of it. I mean, once you put your mind to it, the Holy Spirit will give you ideas what you can do to just keep active. And you will find that your energy levels go through the roof. You will just find that you just keep moving. Others will be wondering, where do you get so much energy from? You know? But it is all possible. And your water, don't be afraid of it. Flush your system. It will flush out the toxins. It will increase your mood as well. Don't be afraid of the sunshine, but don't overdo it. In everything, just practice moderation and give thanks to the Lord. And remember, family time as well is very important. So plan your holidays to get away with the family. And Florence, don't leave. So I just want to thank everyone very much for coming out. And everything that I've presented so far, you can do additional research on it. Google is there to help us all. We may find some information that may not be 100% accurate, but one thing I know for sure is that when we are determined, the Lord will lead us. So that's, again, trust in the Lord. Thank you all. You may be seated for a few minutes. Okay. And calculate that in your 3 hours.
We just need to say thank you to Venus. She put this weekend together, so, brethren. Okay. I'll call on, thank you. Call on Pastor Ron to come and give us the closing prayer, and then you're free to go. God bless you. Have a great weekend.
So it's Sunday, normally my day off, but I'm here. I want to say thank you for all of you for taking time out of your day to be here. And obviously, none of this would have happened if Davina and those involved in the program had put it together. But also, it's good to be able to come and help, because without me being here, none of this would have happened in that sense of the electronics. Because as you can appreciate, mostly they're here on Sabbath, which is only right. But nonetheless, I want to say thank you very much, Davina, for the input that you've put. And thank you for coming. So just close with prayer. Is that okay with everybody? Let's bow our heads. Father God in heaven, we thank you so much for the many things that we have learned over this weekend. We thank you for those that came and shared their expertise. We thank you for Dr. Chidi, especially today and Friday. And we pray that all that we have heard, you will help us to assimilate it. And if we can put it into practice, help us to do so, to enable us to become healthier and better people. So bless us now, we pray, and give us safe traveling mercies as we leave this place. And thank you for being present this morning. Amen. Come and see this lady here. She'll give them outside in the foyer. Thank you. Sorry, we want to say a big thank you to the media team, because they've also taken time out of their days. So just a big thank you for them. So thank you.